Okay, so I wanted to go ahead and do the second part of my Chapter 3 review of Stephen King's It. This chapter is entitled 6 Phone Calls. In the first review, I did the first 3 phone calls, and in this review, I'm going to be doing the last 3 phone calls. Alright, so this next phone call, which is the 4th phone call, is titled Eddie Kaspbrak Takes His Medicine. In this section, we find out that our main character, Eddie Kaspbrak, who's a man who's kind of succumbed to hypochondria, has received a phone call just like the others, and he has to get going. His wife, however, protests. He's a guy who's sort of resigned himself to be taken care of by other people and who sort of relies on his medicine. And I like the visuals here with his wife chasing him around the house, begging him not to leave, and sort of standing in the doorway in a silhouette as he drives away in this cab. So in this chapter as well, we find out that the sewers did indeed play a key role, and I thought that they would. Because we find out that he has this nightmare as he's driving away of being chased through the sewers by someone who has leprosy, and the person sort of sticking their arm in his mouth, and him going to the side and finding one of his classmates or one of his friends lying down dead and basically decomposing down in the sewer. And it is a nightmare, but we're not really sure how much of it's true. It's kind of hinted at that some of it's true, but we're not really sure how much. So again, just kind of continuing the trend of people finding out about having to go back and things sort of rushing back slowly. That's really all there is to say about that one. I liked it. It was a very small slice of life. You could see how paranoia has kind of settled in and taken over this guy's life. But it was a nice little thing. I mean, it wasn't pleasant, but it was interesting. It was an interesting little point of view into how this has affected this guy later in life and how he's reacting to the phone call. Found it really interesting that this guy is actually a chauffeur for celebrities. He drives them around and he has to sort of pawn that off to his wife. But in order to comfort her and to make her think things are going to be okay, he has to lie to her and say, oh yeah, I don't remember who he was driving, but he's like, yeah, he's great. And she's like, really? And he's like, yeah. And he has no idea if it's actually true. He's just kind of put himself in a position where he is going to lie to kind of comfort her. And I think that has some precedent with their relationship just from what I'm reading there. All right, so this next phone call, which is phone call number 5, is called Beverly Rogan Takes a Whoopin'. Now, I think this one was the hardest one to get through as far as reading it and just some of the content being very difficult to get through. This one is involving a woman who has married a man who is extremely abusive toward her. And she gets this phone call and tries to leave, and he doesn't want her to, basically. He tries to keep her there. He basically tells her, you can only leave when I tell you you can leave. And Stephen King did a really good job of just portraying this guy as just a giant asshole, and exactly the kind of guy you can see doing this kind of thing, and a guy who's very insecure about his relationships with women. A slight problem with the way this chapter is written is it could be interpreted as sort of playing up this idea that she's in this relationship that's very abusive, but some part of her actually likes that abuse. I just think authors should be careful with how they portray those kinds of dynamics, because there are a lot of people who think that way. There are a lot of people who think when they treat their partner a certain way, that they can keep doing it because in their mind they're sort of justifying it by saying that they somehow are enjoying this, and that this is not something that's affecting them extremely negatively. So they basically end up fighting, and she ends up incapacitating him, and she gets away. But she gets really beat up in the process. They both do. And in the ending, she's kind of laughing as she's leaving. You know, this is a fictional story. It's just, this is kind of reflective of this is rather an example of some very sort of strange tropes that Stephen King has going with women in particular, in reference to abuse. So, you know, I like that this was in here just to sort of show that there are these types of relationships where people don't allow their partners to just get up and go when they want to. They don't treat them like human beings. They treat them like their property, or a pet or something like that. It's just I'm not sure about some of the ways this chapter was written. But as far as portraying this guy as someone who's very unlikable and very controlling and thinks along the same misogynistic lines as a lot of people, I think he did a good job of conveying that. And lastly, we have our final phone call entitled "Bill Denbrough Takes Time Out." I had to think about what that was called. Bill Denbrough Takes Time Out. If you remember, Bill Denbrough is the older brother of Georgie, and Georgie's the kid who was killed in the very first chapter. So in this chapter, we have the obligatory Stephen King author character. I know it's not in every book that there's an author character, but it seems to be quite a lot. But this guy grew up and he became an author. He went through college. He had some disagreements with his professor, who really did not like his philosophy on writing a story. And I just can't help but think that there's probably some real life elements in that are actually reflective of Stephen King's life. And I could be wrong though. And he's happily married, I think. And he says something really interesting, which I thought proved one of my earlier theories, which was he hadn't thought about his brother in 20 years. And he had some scars on his hand that reappeared after the phone call. So not only do I think that the sewers are going to play an integral role because they're mentioned in this chapter and in this phone call and the fourth phone call, I think that the memory being wiped might also be correct. So it looks like my predictions might be on the money slightly here. Because she even says, why wouldn't you think of your brother in 20 years? And he says everything, but I couldn't. It's almost like something actually made him forget. And it's only when he got the phone call that things came sort of tumbling back to him. And I still don't know what that is. I still don't know what it is about that. But I like some of the details given. He was in the UK I think it was the UK. He was trying to shoot a film and he was going to just slip away, and he told his wife, you can't tell anybody where I'm going, and I have to deal with this. And I don't know, I like the character development in this one a lot. I like the relationship he had with his wife. It's kind of funny because in the first phone call we get two people who have a marriage that's a lot different from this one. It's kind of secretive in a way that seems like something bad is happening, but in this one it seems like it's secretive because he's trying to protect himself. It seems like he's being 100% genuine. He just couldn't remember, and he doesn't really seem to have that sort of psychic sense that the first guy had. But he, his wife even asked him, what was it? What was coming after you? What murdered Georgie? And he basically says, I can't tell you right now. I mean, I could, but if I tell you, it's going to come back to me. And as I'm speaking, and I just don't think I can handle that right now. He has to talk about it with his friends around him. So, and getting different slices of this pie for all 6 of these characters was so interesting, and I'm really excited to read the next chapter now to see what's going to happen, because the next chapter has the word Daria in the title, and so I think we're just going to pick it up right when they get back. Really, really long, but I liked how all of these sort of corroborated. That was really cool. It's a really interesting writing style. That's why I like Stephen King, because the way he writes is pretty innovative. I need to mention this too. I am aware of the fact that Bill Denbrough said he could remember Georgie factually, and he remembered that he died. He just didn't remember the details of it. So I didn't want to make it sound like, he had completely forgotten his brother, or his brother had gotten completely erased from his mind. He remembers him, and he remembers that he died when he was young. He just didn't remember how until recently. So I did understand that. Okay, that is 6 phone calls. We made it, and I will be going through the next chapter next time. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye-bye.